morning, everyone. Welcome to this very exciting session, Breaking Bad. But it's my great pleasure to be in conversation with two incredible women, Manisha, Koirala, and Nandita. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand. Manisha needs no introduction. She is one of India's leading actors. I think many of us have grown up watching her films. She's from Nepal. She was born in a prominent family in Nepal. And she made her Bollywood debut film, Saudagar, in 1991, and then went on to be one of India's leading actresses. And I think you all know the films that she's very famous for, including 1942, A Love Story, Akele Hum Akele Tum, Bombay, Khamoshi, and many more. She took a break from acting in 2012 and returned 5 years later in new and exciting roles, which we'll be talking about as well. She was appointed the Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations Population Fund in 1999 and 2015, and has been involved in relief work in Nepal, and she promotes causes to do with women's rights, prevention of violence against women and trafficking. She was diagnosed with cancer in 2012 and has been cancer-free since. And she's come to Dhaka Lit Fest with her new book, Healed, which will be out in January 2019. So ladies and gentlemen, Manisha. Nandita is a friend of the festival, who's been here before, and I will sort of give a tiny little introduction to her as well, because yesterday we were so excited about her film, I didn't get to say anything about her. A lot of us watched her amazing film Manto yesterday, which premiered for the first time in Bangladesh. She has acted in over 40 feature films in 10 languages, she actually had her directorial debut with her film Farah in 2008, which won many accolades and was very critically acclaimed on the film circuit. She's been on the jury of the Cannes Film Festival twice, in 2005 and 2013. She actually has a master's degree in social work and is a very strong advocate for social justice and human rights. Welcome both of you to Dhaka Lit Fest again, Nandita and Manisha. I think it's a great honor and privilege to have you both here with me today, because both of you in your body of work have defied convention, and it's apparent in both of your work how you've kind of gone beyond the boxes which people like to see, I think, women in the entertainment industry. Manisha, I would like to sort of take a sort of walk back in time to the 90s, when you were extremely successful commercially, with many films, and many films are sort of the big commercial and box office hits of the 80s, 90s. But my question to you is, you actually redefine a lot of the roles that the women were playing those days. So can you tell me a bit about maybe some of your experience and how you chose the roles, and what you were thinking at the time?
Good morning, everyone. It's so exciting to be here, and especially with women I really respect. So, when I started my career in 90s, heroines or mainstream commercial actresses were meant to be doing a certain stereotype of roles and stereotype of setup in films. And I really didn't want to get defined by that. I wanted to go beyond that. I wanted to try something else because I loved parallel cinema or art cinema. I just love cinema, basically. And I wanted to work with different kind of setup. So from a commercial, then parallel or realistic or whatever term you use, I wanted to reach out to various kind of cinema and various kind of filmmaking and various kind of storytelling. And then I tasted the blood and I wanted to do more of that. And because I realized the joy of acting in such movie was, the satisfaction was much more. But then I had to balance being in a commercial setup as well, because that's where people at the masses level knew me and loved me. So singing around the trees was equally entertaining and interesting at the same time when I was doing some serious movies as well.
But I think a lot of the commercial success that you had, those roles were also kind of redefining in a way, and the subject matter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, in that aspect, I would say I was lucky. I was lucky that good filmmakers with good subject came to me. And in my career, I actually didn't go out of my way to want to work with someone. In fact, it has always come to me, and I was lucky enough to recognize those opportunities and then take that on. And so I would say it came to me rather than me actually going and making that decision for myself.
I think, the other thing is that you're well known for sort of taking a sort of step forward and actually sort of doing the more complex and challenging roles.
Yeah, I think I need to be challenged and to be excited about, because otherwise it's the whole thing becomes pretty stagnant and stagnating. And so for a growth, I need to be challenged, and I need to venture out in the areas, other areas which were unknown territories, unknown characters, and to understand a part of playing and being an actor. One of the joy, there are many, but one of the main joy of being an actor is to understand human psychology and to get to know human beings. So the variety of roles that I could play was to understand human beings and understand life through their perspective. So.
Nandita, I would like to come to you. We were just, sort of saying the film that I saw you in was Fire. And that really struck a chord that, that was, I think, one of the mainstream Bollywood films that addressed these issues, perhaps.
I don't know if I'd call it mainstream Bollywood. But it was definitely it was probably the first film that addressed it head on.
So, could you tell us a bit about how you got involved and the reaction?
Well, for one, just to go back to 1996, I was working in an NGO after finishing my master's in social work. I had no dream, desire, ambition of being an actress at all. I did a bit of street theatre before that in a group called Jannat Manch with Sadaf Hashmi. Some of you might have heard of him. He was a theatre activist. And I enjoyed performance like school children do, and songs and dance and all of that, but never thought of acting as a profession. I was introduced to Deepa Mehta. It's a very long drawn story, but through Gulshan Grover, just for Manisha. She would know that's a kind of a funny reference. He's a villain, as you know, but a lovely person in real life. So through him, I got to know Deepa Mehta, and all he told me was, she's doing a film and it's a very bold film. I was like, okay, about women, bold, it's at least worth going and meeting. And we hit it off, and I did the film because I just thought it was a very powerful subject. I come from a very liberal family, and yet we had never really talked about homosexuality at home, even though it was very inclusive and there were a lot of people that we knew who were gays and lesbians, but that was never a point of discussion. So I had understood the subject intellectually, but I don't think emotionally I understood how insensitive and hypocritical a society we actually lived in, where we didn't address these issues, and how insensitive we were to whatever we thought was the other. And that's why Fire for me is a very significant film, because my choices after that... Is there some commotion happening somewhere? কি হচ্ছে ভাই ওখানে? ঝগড়া করবেন না, দুনিয়াতে শান্তি আমার চাই আমরা। No need to fight at personal, political, any levels, please.
Don't worry, they want to see you, but there is no seat.
হ্যাঁ জানি, জায়গা নেই। Next time ওদেরকে বলতে হবে আরো বড় একটা হল for the DLF. DLF deserves now even a bigger auditorium.
স্টেডিয়ামে করলে ভালো।
কিন্তু শান্তিতে আমরা কথা শুনলে সবাই শুনতে পারবে।
হ্যাঁ একটু সবাই যদি একটু শান্তি করে।
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this film, once it came out, in fact, it was a landmark censor decision because they didn't cut a single shot. Even the director and all of us were actually surprised. We were almost prepared for a few cuts. But on the 13th day of the release, a sort of a right-wing group decided this was not part of Indian culture, and that it should be censored and banned, and people were literally physically asked to stop seeing it. And through that, now in retrospect, I feel in a way it was good because it forced the society to think about freedom of expression. It was almost one of the first time that people just took to the streets and said, why should you be telling us what we should watch and what we should not? Whether it's a good or a bad film, we'll decide. And so the reactions were many. From people who hated it, somebody sitting next to me on a flight would say that, yeah, your acting was okay, very natural. You're not lesbian, are you? Or somebody would say that, are you trying to make all the women lesbian and just, so as if in 2 hours you can become a lesbian? By that token, there would be no LGBTQ because most of our stories are all about Raja Rani, So it was just, I think that film was very significant because of the kind of conversation it triggered about the issue itself and the larger issue of what we are tolerant about, what we are not, how compassionate or sensitive we are, how realistic we are, how honest we are. It just raised a whole gamut of questions, and we are very happy that finally the law that criminalizes homosexuality, which is a very archaic law, has been repealed, and now, at least in India, it's not a crime. So I want to believe that Fire had a small role to play in it, in triggering that conversation and bringing it to the public domain.
Yeah, sort of connecting that, Manisha, you've talked in the past about how roles for women are often sort of just have been boxed in, sort of the heroine or the mother. And I think the kind of roles you've been choosing are trying to sort of get out of that. Perhaps you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, it's actually really sad. Part of my work environment is either you are the love interest or you become the mother. So to find a role of an interesting woman and to make stories, because I feel women are the most interesting creatures, and they are not only the love interest and the mother or the sister of the protagonist, the hero, but actually if we choose to tell stories about women, there'll be a gamut of storytelling about different aspects of women. And so there is a certain kind of stereotyped in the box categories that we have in our movies, which to survive in that is very limiting, and to survive in that is very difficult. So I do tend to get attracted towards a story where women are portrayed slightly differently. And I would want to reach out to those filmmakers who are brave enough to tell those stories. And it's basically, you know, your boundaries are not just limited by a certain type of storytelling, but you go out of that. And so I have consciously made decisions, and following my heart and my mind and my spirit to those things. But it is tough. Let's say out of 100, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 are making such stories.
And you went back and did a diploma in film and had an experiment of producing something which actually had mainly a female cast and characters.
Yeah, I did in NYU. I did filmmaking course, and I did produce a movie which was the protagonist of the film was 2 female leading ladies, and it was slightly different. It didn't work, but in commercial sense, but it did in many areas. In the sense, it was comical. The protagonists, the leadings were the ladies who were, you know, telling the stories, and I mean, I was a producer from a non-film background and getting into all that. So, yeah, I mean, people woke up and said, "What kind of movie have you made?" But they took notice of the fact, and I mean, I just took a chance of that.
Nandita, I want to sort of ask you about your interest in Manto, and you've been asked this before probably about being a woman director. And you know, I think as women we want to be just like a director rather than a woman director. So what are your thoughts on that? Was there a certain reason where you felt as a woman you could bring a different perspective to that?
Yes, especially after Firak, I was suddenly called on these panels. There were so few women, I mean less women even 10 years ago than there are probably now. So there would be these panels with a few women directors, and we all had to talk about what it feels like to be a woman director. Now there was no way that we would know what it feels like to be a male director anyway. So, you know, so we were like, okay, this is how we feel. And all of us pretty much said that we are directors, and when we are working, we are not constantly thinking we are a woman. But having said that, just as we see some films and we say, this film definitely has been made by a man. I don't know if you have experienced that, but you can almost feel a sort of male gaze in the film. And a lot of the films are probably like that. And as an actress, Manisha, you might have experienced that as well. Just as there's a male gaze, and just as we cannot generalize, but we do, and there are reasons for that, I think there's also a female gaze. And that inadvertently comes. I mean, we all are a product of multiple identities. You know, my being a woman is one of my identities. There are various other identities. It could be national identity, it could be the color of my skin, it could be, you know, which part of India I come from. It could also not just be the given identities, but the acquired identities, what I like to do, and, you know, am I a veg or a non-veg, etc. But somehow the identity of a woman, I who completely keep championing this multiple identity thing, I realize that the identity of a woman has become, or for whatever reason, is my primary identity, because I'm never allowed to forget it. For better or for worse reasons, I'm constantly reminded of that. I just want to be treated as a person, forget about being a director, I just want to be a person. But whether it's about, oh, you're looking nice or not looking nice, or it's too dark, you can't do this, or what you're wearing, or you've lost weight and you've put on weight, so much of it is about being the woman. And therefore, I've struggled with this, and strangely, as I was doing Manto and I was being asked the same question, and in the last few years we've been talking a lot more about the fact that we need more women directors. And when we say that, and I definitely say that, I'm sure all of you would agree, if we say that, then I thought I have to own that term myself. I can't say I'm just a director, but I want more women directors to be in the film. And therefore I feel I've begun to own it and say, yes, I am a woman director. And I'm not going to shy away from that. So it's a kind of a nuanced thing, I would say, where I want to ideally be treated as a director, but it's very skewed. Till such times, it's fine if I'm seen as a woman director. I don't know if
And
that explains.
I have to say this. This is a world over thing where I think women as a director or as a technician, you don't see a woman behind the camera. I don't know if there is a camera woman.
There are now, thankfully, and the generation.
Or behind a light.
Exactly.
You know, so it's only 20% of the cinema is women,
Yeah.
and
Not even
80.
20. It's much less actually.
And the rest is done by the male. So I think it's about time
Yes.
getting into that.
No, absolutely. And because of that, that's why we have to first own it up ourselves. Because we can't say we want more women behind the camera if we are saying, please do not identify me as a woman. Okay, if that, first I own it and then we say that yes, we want more, and hopefully when it's more equal, then those questions will be irrelevant. Nobody will ask us then, and hopefully that day will come sometime sooner than later.
Manisha, you actually in your book, you actually have a chapter on the male gaze. Perhaps you could, sort of, because I haven't, the book is not out yet, so I haven't read that chapter. So perhaps, we were talking a bit about it. Maybe you could sort of.
Basically, I have, my book is actually about, it's called Healed, and it's actually about a period of my life where I was diagnosed with cancer, and how the healing process happened. But then I thought, it doesn't complete if I don't share with my readers what is me now, how do I think, what do I think, what are my values, how do I perceive life. And so in that context, I had many things to say, but I had to choose few, and one of the important one was about this male gaze and constantly being judged and constantly being this thing by the standards of others, and how successful we are in our lives, or how, so everything comes from, oh, she's married but a marriage failed, so she's a failure, or she's not, after a successful stint in her career, she's not gotten hold of a rich guy, and to get married, so then it's a failure. Or of course my cancer happened and it's a failure. I mean, it's always how pretty, how, as Nandita rightly said, how pretty or how glamorous or how thin or how old or how young. It's always about being valued on those terms, by other people's gaze, and it's mostly men. It's mostly by men's standards of what a woman should be and how it should, So, where is the existence of a woman's, and where do I stand? Well, I'm a woman, and how do I look at life? Do I see myself as a failure? Who are you to tell me whether my life has been a failure or a success? Do I feel that? And so it's all, I've dealt with those issues about being on a constant male gaze, and we all know the fact that in our movies, constantly women are objectified. They have to, constantly. I think you can have beauty and brain. You can have things to say. At the same time, you can be glamorous and beautiful. It's all that in that chapter. It's all that and more in that chapter.
When you're talking about the mainstream and sort of being boxed in and having to do certain roles or this gaze, is that a place that, and you're pushing the boundaries in that place too, is that a place where sort of that you feel that that you can change the stereotypes commercially in mainstream? Because I know that Nandita sticks a lot to sort of more of the sort of alternate or the independent. But I was wondering, before we go to Nandita, whether you could sort of tell us a bit about your thoughts on that.
that, now actually slowly with few male and female directors making commercial films which are inclusive of women who are not typical and stereotyped. And I think the boundaries are getting slightly wider, and there is more inclusion of such characters in the mainstream films as well. But we still have to achieve. We still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go.
Nandita, would you like to sort of say something about your choice in that regard?
Well, my journey has been very different in that sense, because right from the beginning, because I didn't really see acting as a career, as a profession, it also frees you in some ways, because if you don't have an ambition, you don't know, you don't have to reach anywhere, you don't have to go to any place. So, and also the few films that I did, which were more mainstream for me and were alternative for the directors, like I would say Aks or Pita. Aks was with Mr. Bachchan by Rakesh Mehra, and Pita was by Mahesh Manjrekar with Sanjay Dutt and Jackie Shroff, which were more sort of commercial. For me, it was not only how they portray women and what the kind of stories, because those stories were interesting actually. The treatment was much more commercial, but it's also extremely hierarchical. And I would also, in fact, be curious to know from you, Manisha, how did you navigate that? Because I found it very difficult. And was it because I came from a social work background where all your efforts are towards making things more egalitarian, more democratic, and then you go to this film setup where you are at the higher end because of being the lead actress, you are at the higher end of the hierarchy, and extremely uncomfortable because everything is so stratified, and the light boys and the spot boys and the sort of the working class, so to say, has different food, and the actors get different food, and there's just, in everything there's a hierarchy built in, and constantly I was being told, oh, you won't ever become a star, you're too friendly with people, you sit anywhere, you've got to behave like a star, and I was like, oh my God, if that's what it takes to be a star, happily I wouldn't want to. So I think in that sense my journey was very different, and that's why from the Hindi film industry I started branching out to what we call regional films, which is a bit derogatory I think, because the other languages in India, I think they're as Indian as Hindi is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they do tend to make very good movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, I found a greater sense of conviction in those films and greater courage to follow those convictions. They weren't like, even in these films that I did in Hindi, where they started and where they ended were like two different things. There was a series of compromises that happened through the making of the film, and it wasn't the film that I'd really signed up for. So that's why even the South Indian languages, which are very tough, and it was a struggle, but because those stories and those directors were really wonderful, I started being part of it. And for me, films has always been more a means to an end. So I ended up doing actually not that many interesting, and in a sense there were interesting roles, but more than that, I wanted to be part of interesting stories. And I didn't see enough as an actor. And therefore, like a lot of people said, oh, you did a lot of films that were rural stories, like village characters. But for me, they were very different. A village character in Mrinal Sen's film in Bengal was very different from a village character in Kerala by, let's say, Adur Gopalakrishnan. So for me, they were not the same. So, in fact, I remember once Shyam Benegal asked me to act in a film called Hari Bhari, which had Shabana Azmi and other actresses, and he gave me a role of this very religious, actually quite a pain, the Muslim character who's constantly doing her namaz and is always being horrible to her sister-in-law, which was Shabana Azmi. So we had quite a difference from Fire, where we were in love. But so she was, I was this very irritating, like I didn't like the character at all. And she was always being very selfish and money-minded and all of that. And I asked him, I said, no, that's not me, I don't relate to that character at all. And he said, you're an actress, you're supposed to do different roles. Don't keep sort of being your activist constantly, And then when I did the role, in the beginning, because I disliked her so much, I was unable to almost perform her because I was like, this is not how I would do. And slowly when I embraced her, I realized she has her own reasoning of doing what she does. And it's actually quite a funny, interesting character. And it's funnier because when the audience sees me in that character, they keep thinking this is so unlike, oh, I want to believe that's what they're thinking. But that's how I kind of processed it. So for me also being an actor through these films was a discovery of my own self and sort of living with different characters, but more importantly, different stories.
Manisha, talking about sort of different stories, some of the recent roles that you've been playing are stories which are not black and white, don't have the sort of typical, I guess, happy ending. What kind of drew you to these kind of...
The few things that Nandita said also I would want to comment on, and is, first I'll answer your question, is that, I also over the years became very strict about my, or conditioned about my own values. Like when I did Lust Stories, Dibakar Banerjee, he had this ending which was like brilliant ending, but me being me wanted to leave both the men. And wanted to, why does she need a man? She can just walk off, and then she can just walk off by saying, you guys are too weak. So I wanted to have that kind of an ending, and but luckily I listened to my director, and my director convinced me, and the ending that he portrayed was beautiful. It ends on a grey shade, she is with the husband at the same time. She will never be under him now. She will make decision for herself. So I feel I also should not force my views, my values onto the character that I'm portraying. Because me as an actor, as an artist, I need to explore and be fluid. And then only I'll be able to reach out to many psychology, many different kinds of things which I don't comprehend in my personal space. So yeah, to that, and she was talking about not relating to the character, and that's actually we actors, we are constantly thrown characters that we actually personally don't agree with. But the challenge is to portray them well, to understand that, and get into the skin of that character, and somehow convince yourself, and then portray that, So, and I think there's a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of beauty in that, to be an artist, to be exploring lives other than, so.
And what about sort of how you've been able to navigate the sort of hierarchical and commercial side of the industry?
I've been told many times that I'll never be a star, so that wasn't new.
But you became one. That's the difference.
Yeah, I just somehow initially there were many discouragement. There's many. Everybody tries to pull you if you don't fit a certain mold, and if you don't do things according to what has been being done before, then obviously there's a lot of criticism. People don't understand you. They say, "Kahan se aake, what does she think of herself?" And so blah 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 blah. So I've faced many things. I've been in that industry for 30 years. So obviously I've faced every situation, but luckily I've had some great people with me. So I could always fall back on that, and I could always discuss my issue with people that I trusted and who guided me correctly. So if in 100 people, there were 100 situations which was tough for me personally. There were 10 or 15 which was great for me, and people respected me, valued me for who I was, for whatever I was doing, and that was enough for me to survive. that was enough for me to give me encouragement to go through the bad phases and bad comments and, putting me down and all that. So I held on to those precious few people who encouraged me.
Nandita, I wanted to sort of move on to your activism and also sort of the campaign that you're involved with, Black is Beautiful campaign and Dark is Beautiful, and that whole, this idea that, and I think I was sort of quite shocked recently hearing a lot of accounts of, how you think the world has moved on, but it's still so important, sort of how a woman is seen as this skin color, or her prospects in marriage or prospects in the industry. Perhaps you could tell me a bit about that.
Yes, the matrimonial ads haven't quite changed. So that's a good reflection of that we haven't really progressed in that department. Being a dark person, living in South Asia, you're constantly aware of it. I was very fortunate that my parents didn't put any of that complex in me. In fact, when I think back, my father never talked about how I looked, because that was never a point of discussion. If I would wear something, he would say, oh, where is this from? And he would talk about the craft or the handloom or something about that. But how you look was just not something I grew up with. So even when people would say, oh, you look nice, it was still new, because whether you look bad or nice or dark or light, it was never a consideration. But being a dark person, there's always an aunt, there's a friend, there's somebody telling you, don't go out in the sun, you should try this cream, put haldi. Every shop you go to, they keep giving you a cream that will remove your tan, and I keep saying I was born with this tan, but it doesn't help, because they keep trying to sell you that. And if you see, the products have only increased. Even a face wash, which probably touches your face for like 20 seconds, is supposed to make you lighter skin. So while I have addressed this issue in my various other conversations and talks that I do, especially with young people, because often when I'm talking about a completely different issue, some girl would raise her hand and say, ma'am, how come you're so confident despite being dark? And that sort of makes you think like, okay. So, how much of the self-esteem and confidence is linked to even the color of our skin, we don't sort of realize it. It was only in 2013 when an organization called Women of Worth, they reached out to me and said, would you give a quote and a photo to support this campaign? And sometimes you're not fully involved in a campaign, but you think it's a good campaign and you do that much. Let's say if it's an organ donation, organic farming, so those kind of things, I gave that quote, and I didn't realize suddenly it went completely viral, and by default I became the face of this campaign. And because also the comparatively darker skinned actresses, and I don't know what you think, Manisha, but they have all progressively become lighter and lighter with every film. So no names taken.
I was told about this and I had not noticed. I swear, I had not noticed that. But I was
first films,
I think
and
yesterday somebody was mentioning while you were traveling, have you noticed that she's become fairer, or he's become fairer?
We won't say who that he or she is, but but that's true. And that's why by default, like, oh God, for last 22 years her skin color is the same. Okay, let's make her the face of this campaign. So I think it was more a reaction to fair being synonymous to beautiful. That's why the campaign, because initially my reaction was, why would you call it dark is beautiful? Because that in itself is a judgment, just be yourself or be natural. I would call a campaign that. And they said, no, we started this campaign as a response to Fair and Lovely, which is a product, but which has been there for years and has reinforced. And it's only after joining the campaign I realized how much harm it has done to sort of scores of young girls, but men and women, and how much attention they just put to that, and how it has really killed their interest, their talent, their self-confidence, their self-esteem. I still get emails, people stop me literally to talk about it. There were women who wanted to commit suicide because they couldn't please their parents. And they've been trying this fairness cream, and it's shocking that something that you are born with and you are made to feel so small purely because of your skin color. So I try and do what I can, and try and talk to people, but I don't know, there's a small little change that has happened, I'm told, in the advertising. The consumer industry knows how to bypass that and find ways, and still sort of, now they call it bright and they call it all kinds of things. But, and I'm sure it's the same in Bangladesh. In fact, yesterday a journalist told me that it has that campaign has helped here also, and they started a campaign called Shundor Mane Phorsha Noy or something like that. So I'm glad that Shundor Mane Phorsha Noy. Seeing a full range here in any case, so we are more than the color of our skin.
Absolutely. It's really sad. I think there's a huge complex there.
But I think even light-skinned people can join the campaign, in the sense that we don't always, those who are the victims don't have to be the only torch bearers. Like, when I'm very vocal about LGBTQ issues, they keep saying, but you're straight. What's your story? Do you have someone in the family? Or, what's the reason? So we can also help
I
each
think
other.
this constant obsession with, we talked about it earlier about how women look, and using that as a sort of value of who you are as a woman, and how do we cope then as women when we're aging, because we're not as we were when we were 20.
It's again, I feel it comes under my chapter, male gaze. It's this whole thing of aging and wanting to look younger, and wanting to look prettier and younger, and I see the pressure is a lot more on women than on men, and I don't know if I should say this, but like we have 60-year-old actors working with 20-year-old female actresses. So that I think is quite, it looks odd. You really... But that's a part of a reality. And so that, and being in this profession, you're constantly trying to look younger, and there's been tragic stories of trying to look younger than what you are. And I mean, that just shows there's a huge, amount of pressure, there's a huge amount of closed, it's so, for me, it's a very scary thing when you cross 40 and suddenly you get typecast to be given as a mother's role.
And your contemporaries are still dancing around with 20-year-olds.
Yeah, so I'm like, then that's when it's starting to me. No wonder people are going through so much of surgical changes to look young, because they don't want to get into a mother's category. At the moment you cross 40 and a little bit of grey hair starts showing, you're into that. So I feel that's something that we need to look into and talk about it, and maybe do see some changes in the near future about that as well.
I could talk to you guys for like hours, but I think we can get some questions from the audience now. So do we have a couple of mics? Okay, so the gentleman in the middle, can we get a mic there to him?
Thank you, Nandita, Manisha. I am going back 24 years back. When I was in New York, I watched your movie 1942, Last Story, Anil Kapoor and you. And I love the stories and the songs that in the movies, the bright and the part is attractive songs. This morning I will request you just 4 lines for us. Just to say from the last story.
I think we're going to stick to questions. Can we have... Yeah, so the lady in the green, there, just, yeah. Take 2 from the middle and then...
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nandita Dai and Manisha ma'am from coming. Nandita is like ours. I consider her like one of us. And I just woke morning to see you. It's like it's still a dream.
Can we answer some questions?
I just want to know what do you think that the item songs in Bollywood, do you support it? Do you consider that as a part of women empowerment or something like that? What is your opinion? Thank you.
Well, as long as it's aesthetically done, I don't think there should be an issue. Aesthetically done is what I have an issue with.
Nandita, you want to say something?
Well, I mean, a lot of the item numbers, and I don't watch that many mainstream films, so I'm not very knowledgeable about it. But a lot of the item numbers objectify women. I mean, often there's a woman in the middle who's gyrating, the camera is zooming into their various body parts, and all these men are kind of, either wanting to touch her or are trying to woo her in a very sort of sexual way. So I don't know what the message really reaches, that here is a woman who's available. Is it that if she says no, it doesn't matter? I don't know what the impact, but for me as a woman, I know that I do find it kind of uncomfortable and...
I have another point of view.
Sure.
It's like, we did Chaya Chaya, that
Yeah,
also is an item song, so I think that's shot well.
It's beautifully shot, and it's a lovely song as well, and
It depends how the director is shooting actually, isn't it?
It does, it definitely does, but I think maybe 15 years ago, what seemed okay, when you see that today with more conversations about it and more awareness about where we are going, some of those things still do seem, it's like showing violence. You can show violence so beautifully, and it is being shown in some great films, that you almost glamorize violence. Now I'm not sure whether I want to see violence and want people to like violence and sort of normalize violence. So I'm personally a little uncomfortable with any kind of representation where it does purely objectify women, and especially when the way the camera sort of is wanting, it's like a titillating scene, and it's really for the male gaze even in the audience. So I don't know.
And another the one sitting down there. Yeah. Where are the mics? Oh, okay. Okay, Anila, go ahead.
Three beautiful women sitting there. It's beautiful. All of you are wonderful. Our guests, Nandita, you're brilliant. I admire your articulation. My question is, what inspires you? How do you make time? I mean, you're such a busy person with such a hectic schedule. You must have your own time to reflect better, right? What inspires you, and how do you make time for yourself?
I think we all are busy. I haven't met anyone in a long time who said I'm not busy. So I wouldn't say that I'm alone. And I think as working women, as working mothers, we are busier because we are constantly juggling between our roles. What inspires me, I think, life and meeting people and these kind of interactions, and if you're a constant observer, which I'm sure all of us are, that's what inspires you. When somebody says something terrible, that also inspires you, because that pushes you that we need to work, we need to continue working because that's not going right. When somebody is doing brilliant work and is so passionate and committed, that inspires you because you feel that, all is not lost. It reaffirms your faith in humanity, and you feel like, what am I doing? It's not even a patch on, what this person's doing. So inspiration, I think, is all around. I do get very little time for myself, and I think women in general make very little time for themselves. And we all are constantly wanting to do things for others, and especially in your work, which is also for yourself, of course. But complete me time, I don't know what it means. Especially when your work and life, there is no difference. You're not doing a job where it ends and you say, okay, now it's life. And that has its beauty, because your work is your life and your life is your work. So you don't really need a downtime. I do miss having focused time with my child, listening to music, and I'm very sleep deprived. So that's one thing I want to focus on.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving me the opportunity. This is my second time asking the question after yesterday. I wanted to ask, when you mentioned both of you come from privileged families and not really had to face the male gaze or the societal, what a dark girl would otherwise face from the childhood. Now that you're a mother of a child and as a son, how do you train to have, because he's the one who would grow up to be a man and would have a male gaze. But being the son of Nandita Das, how would he be different in the society?
That's true. Somehow, because there's such a preference for a male child, that the opposite happens when you're sort of liberal and you're aware of all these issues. We really wanted a daughter, which is a bias of another kind. But and then when we had a son, and I almost didn't know what to do. You're like, because you want to make your daughter feisty and full of freedom and questioning, and then you have this son, and you realize that you have an equally, if not more, a bigger responsibility in making sure that your son grows up to be a sensitive person, believes in equality, and there's genderization everywhere. The biggest challenge is, how do you protect your child? Because as he's growing up, I'm not the only influence. There are various other influences. There's pink and blue right from your childhood. You go to a toy store, they ask you, is it a boy or a girl? I'm like, how does it matter? Just show me toys that are right for this age. So it is a constant battle. In fact, it happened to the opposite. He has a cousin who's much lighter skinned, and we were talking about this whole dark skin, light skin, and he heard it, and he said, but I don't feel any differently from Riyansh, that's his cousin's name. So he thought he should not have a bias against a lighter colored child because he didn't understand. So I was very happy that till now he's not been introduced to this whole boy-girl thing. Even in his class, boys want to play differently, girls want to do all of that. So I'm trying. You don't want to over-pressure a child either with all the things that we have learnt in our, through our adult life. We've gone through various experiences. So he will find out, he will figure out. We can only give them that nourishment. We can't really tell them where to go, and he will find out who he is, and he's exposed to all of this. He sometimes listens to my talks as well. We have lots of conversations. I think sometimes we undermine children. I feel like he's a full person. He has his own mind. We discuss about various things, from violence to man-woman to what it is to dominate, to not. He was yesterday asking me, Mama, do you believe in half full glass or half empty glass? So he must have heard things. So we talk about various things, and whether conversation at levels of government or as friends, as strangers, with mother-child, I think we have to keep dialoguing. That's probably the answer to some extent.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to, I don't know, I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but I feel what I love about the way you said it is not pushing your own ideas onto the child. Let child be secured and have the dialogue and be open. Because I think this is where parents, when the medical doctor parents want their children to be doctors, and all the issues that I have faced in my adulthood, I would want my child. So the way you're doing things is pretty impressive, because you're fluid. You're not,
Not always. I sometimes do want him to do a certain thing, and I'm like, this will be really good for you. You need to expose yourself. And I say, I really don't want to do it. And then I have to respect that as well. And I say, okay, there will be
Yeah,
a time
letting
when
a child have a personality.
because
rather
I'm also a first-time mother, and so it's not like I've had any training in being the right parent. So you're constantly navigating through that.
So, let's see, third, right, down the aisle.
And ওখানে ভুলবেন না ওরা যে বসে আছে
Next
ওখানে
time,
একটা মাইক আছে
yeah, that person, yeah. The blue one at the back. Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So my question is, how do you, as a part of the Bollywood industry itself, how do you respond to the culture of Bollywood not giving the benefit of doubt to the survivors of the Me Too movement, specifically in the light of the recent events of allegations made on great actors and great public figures like Nana Patekar or even Sajid Khan to begin with? Like, how do you respond to the culture of Bollywood not taking into consideration the victim's testimony first and instead asking like repetitive questions as to why or whether or not the investigations took place and still wait for the investigation to come out even after not giving the victim a chance to speak out?
Okay, I have only few things to say about it. Firstly, I would want to say that being a woman and being a rebel, I've always believed in women empowerment, number one. Number two is that I do not agree trials by social media, because this is where I feel is if there is a serious allegation, there should be a proper investigation, and the person who's found guilty should be punished. The third thing I want to say is that I am a woman who's been working in that industry for 30 years. I have never considered myself to be a victim. And even with cancer, when I got cancer, I don't want people to pity me. I wanted to be a survivor, I want to be a fighter, and I want to be, and I want to empower those people who are vulnerable. But we need to stop playing poor me card and be strong. I encourage women to come out and speak, because it does take a lot of guts to come out and speak. So there is no black and white till I feel till somebody is truly guilty. The reason I refrain from talking so much is because you're suddenly in a spot, either you're trolled if you're going against the flow of tide, then is that fair? I don't know people and the situation has happened. If the situation has happened, I condemn it completely. But beyond than that, what else can I say? I've been an actor, and I've been there, and it takes to be, actually, honestly speaking, to be a woman itself. When a young girl is being raised, there's so many bouncing on that goes in gullies, in household, in relatives, and I know so many stories. Just by being a woman, in the trains, in the roads, in this thing, you are pushed around, you're pinched around, you're, at your workspace, in various stages in our lives. We are constantly pushed around. We need to really be strong. We need to be a fighter.
Anything, can I see the lights up there? Yes, there's a gentleman right here in the front.
Do I have
we get
a
the mic?
Jore bole din.
Oh,
Ashbe out.
so I have like two questions. Firstly, I want to bring up an issue that you already brought up. Because it's very relevant to Bangladesh and because India's culture has to certain extent. So you brought up the fact that there are 60-year-old actors acting with 20-year-old actresses. So in this instant, the problem is that it's 60-year-old actresses are not acting with 20-year-old actors per se, and this is a problem. And I think.
What's your question?
Yeah, my question is, as feminists, do you think you guys, or even say like the personas like Priyanka Chopra, are doing enough to point these things out? This is my first question, and another question. So it's relevant to the recent question asked by someone else in the downstairs. So if someone has certain agency or power in the law, we have seen powerful people bend the law, and in those instances, aren't social media trials or social media traction more reliable or more
I didn't get that thing.
I think he's talking about is social media trial fair and needed. Is that what your question is? That social media trials are needed?
Yeah,
when people in power are bending the rules, is that what your question?
Yeah, it was. That's it.
What do you say? Because what is not acceptable to me is injustice. Whether it's by social media or by people in power. Either, if they are not being just, if they're not bringing justice, is not acceptable to me.
So what about the first question?
Can we have another? Yeah, right at the front, the gentleman here. Yeah. No, the gentleman on the end of the chair. Yes. Okay.
Hi Manisha ma'am and hi Nandita ma'am. It's such a pleasure to meet both of you and to know your creative minds. So I have a very short and simple question. I know Manisha ma'am, you just said that it's important for young women to be fighters and to be strong. So Nandita ma'am, I want to know if you can add a little bit to how young women can break barriers, break stereotypes, and continue to flourish in today's day. And you can also add on a little bit more if you'd like. Thank you.
Well, it is in a way a very personal thing and at the same time a collective thing, right? I mean, we all impact each other. For instance, the women, even the feminists of the 60s were very different from the feminists of the 80s, and today's younger women are far less tolerant of any kind of harassment or any kind of sexist comment. Things that maybe Manisha and I still navigated through. Not that we tolerated it, not that we, I don't know what you have to say to that, Manisha, but we found our ways. We sometimes retorted, sometimes we went the other way, but we were probably more polite about it, maybe more tolerant. And today the tolerance of that is less, which is great, because we don't want to be tolerating any kind of abuse. So I think to be confident, to define yourself beyond how we look and what our definitions are being given by others, which Manisha also talked about, to further our own interests, our own talents, to have faith in oneself, and yet not get too self-obsessed. In the sense that social media can also be a very narcissistic space. So how to create that balance of saying, okay, I'm a drop in the ocean, I have my little bit, but I'm still a big, I want to be a full drop of the ocean in the ocean. So I'll play my part. I'll play my part in this collective change. And that's why for me, this Gandhi's quote that I often quote, be the change you want to see in the world, is a very powerful thought. Which means we all want a better world, we want a more peaceful world, we want a more equal world, but it's not going to happen on its own. And as young people who have that idealism, hopefully, have that energy, have far more probably agency than many others, have more opportunities, exposure, if they can be part of that change, I think the change would be faster. It will happen anyways, but you all can hasten the process.
Manisha, yeah. I really truly believe in having confidence, really nurturing yourself and nurturing your ambition and ideas, and being compassionate towards yourself as well as your surroundings. And there is, when I say that women need to be be a fighter and be strong. At the same time, the greatest quality of being a woman is being compassionate. So I feel life is never this direction or that direction. There's always a nice fluid and a balance, a sense of balance. And if you're confident and you nurture yourself and you really, because in success in any field is a lot of hard work. Nothing comes easy. So be prepared. Put in your hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, work hard. Keep your dreams alive. That is where your fighting spirit comes from, not from fighting with people. But honestly, keeping your dreams alive and willing to work hard and just doing, putting the hours. So being strong is that. Being strong doesn't necessarily mean going out and abusing and da-da-da-da-da, but actually, being single-mindedly focused about your goals and knowing that, God, the divine or nature has made all of us equal and if not better as a woman. So, sorry, but so we can achieve that. Have the confidence that we can achieve that. This is a magical life, this is a magical opportunity, and be willing to truly work hard. And through your tough times, keep your spirits and your dreams alive. That's what I would like to say.
Thank you so much. That's all we have time for today. I would like to have deeply thank both of you, Nandita and Manisha, for sharing, so much from your heart today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.